get a little notification on your screen to let you know that we are recording. But happy Friday, everybody. We only ever host these webinars on Friday, so my brain forever has a positive association between hosting webinars and it being a Friday. The layout for today is going to be that we're going to get stuck into 60 minutes of incredibly valuable content specifically targeted to this community. You probably all watched that milestone moment for me, and I've got to say, in terms of it being 0 to vision board, it was an 11 out of 10. And for me, the story to being featured in Forbes was, I'd say, like, better than I could have dreamt it. And if I could have written it, it would have been like that. So Bianca and I were at a small business Christmas party, and she walked right up to me, knew my name, and said, "Hi, I'm an editor in Forbes. I've been following you for a really long time and would love to write a feature on you," which I feel like, as a small business owner, I died and went to heaven and was like, cool, this networking event is immediately worth my time and I can go home and die happy. But for lots of us, it doesn't work that way. And for a lot of us, press is incredibly hard to get. Pitching to press in a way that doesn't feel icky, feels valuable, and feels like you've got a great story to tell. It's all a part of that too. And so, as always, I wanted to find a way to use our journey and our community to find a way to bring this content to you as well. And so I'm very, very happy to be joined by Grace and Bianca, who both work together on It's the Scoop. So Bianca is an incredible journalist, and Grace does all things PR. I'll let them introduce themselves, but before we get stuck in, I've just put the social media handles in the chat. As you know, we work at Accountancy really, really hard behind the scenes to curate this content and bring it to you completely free, just by being part of our community. And so the very, very best way to say thanks on this very sunny Friday morning, whilst also increasing your visibility and exposure, is to take a picture, share the fact that you're here today, share it on your Instagram stories, tag It's the Scoop with Bianca and Grace, and also tag Accountant She. That literally is the best way to say thank you. It's why we all come together and bring our communities together to deliver this content. And so because Bianca can't come up to all of us at Christmas parties and offer us a piece in Forbes, I'm very excited to hand over to take a deep dive into PR exposure and all things Forbes and journalism. Over to you, Bianca and Grace.
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. It's really interesting. So I don't typically go about organizing the features I write in that way, but I didn't know that Rachel was going to be at that party. And as Rachel just said, I'd been following along with Accountant She for a while. I was really impressed with what Rachel was doing, and she was there at the party, and I was like, excellent, I'm going to go over and I am going to get the story that other business owners need to hear from Rachel for my Forbes audience. So this workshop, as you may or may not know from the kind of info that was put out before we got here, is all about teaching you how to get featured in titles like Forbes and other world-renowned media without hiring PR teams. And even if you've never got media before, or if you're not a hugely established business yet with a huge following, these things are really, really possible. So before we get into that, which is going to be very value driven, we very much like to practice what we preach in that area, and we will give you a lot of value that you can go away and action after this session. We just want to tell you a little bit more about ourselves, so you know what it is that kind of brings us here today to teach you this stuff. So as Rachel was saying, I am Bianca Barrett. I am a journalist. I started my career at the Evening Standard, and I've written a lot of different lifestyle and culture features for places like BBC Good Food. I've written for the Sunday Times and for Vogue and Refinery 29, The Independent, so many different places. And I've also been a talking head on Sky News, talking about issues surrounding gender equity. And I have had a column at Forbes for over 5 years, where I'm a senior contributor talking about women in business and issues surrounding women in the workplace. And through all that work, something that I really started to notice, particularly when I started at Forbes, was the amount of questions I would get from entrepreneurs and founders who were like, I would love to be featured somewhere like that, but I have no idea how to go about it. Or they tell us stories of, yeah, I've hired PR and I spent a lot of money on it and it didn't really work out for me, something we'll get into in a bit more detail in a bit. Or they're just saying, oh, I've pitched so many times and I just don't get anywhere. And as somebody on the inside, somebody who receives roughly 100 pitches a day for Forbes, I've learned obviously a lot about what works in the pitching process and what doesn't. And what you'll be pleased to hear is there is so much that you can do for yourselves that doesn't require you to hire somebody external to do it on your behalf. And that actually oftentimes that is the best way to do it anyway. So I founded The Scoop off the back of that as a place, a sort of self-learning platform for business owners, founders, entrepreneurs, creatives to learn the tools and the skills needed to do media outreach in a really practical and feasible way without it feeling like a huge extra thing they have to do in their business on top of all the other plates they're already spinning. And all from the point of view of media insiders. And then Grace came on board about a year ago, and I'll let Grace introduce herself here. But Grace brings this PR aspect as well. So even though I bring the kind of journalist, media insider aspect, as someone who's worked in the industry for a long time, Grace knows a lot about the practicalities of doing media outreach. So Grace, over to you. I will let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Bianca. So as Bianca said, I have been in the kind of PR and media world for over a decade now. It was always my dream to become a journalist when I was about 16, 17. And then I went and worked at Condé Nast for a little while when I graduated university, and swiftly realized that actually I was more interested in the PR side of things than I was in the actual writing side of things. So very quickly after that, I actually founded my own agency. And exactly as Bianca said, I had people coming to me all the time saying, I've tried PR, it didn't really work, I was spending loads of money, and I don't really get the point of it. What is the point of what you do? The amount of times I've answered that question. So I really wanted to kind of change the way that PR was being utilized by entrepreneurs, small, medium-sized businesses, but then also big businesses. So my PR agency over the last 10 years really kind of took a very different approach to getting press for my brands and my clients. And then I met Bianca, as she said, about it was about 2 years ago now, shouldn't it be? And we just got chatting about how different the PR and media landscape is today than it was when we both started out in it, and how much possibility there is for people to do their own PR. I'm so passionate about saying to people, if you can do it yourself, do it yourself. If you you don't need to employ me, you really don't. The skills are something that you can learn. It's not something that you need someone to do for you. So Bianca and I got chatting, and she had already founded The Scoop at that point, and it was just the most natural kind of combination of both of our skills. So I kind of bring the kind of PR media strategy side of things. This is what I do. The techniques that we teach within The Scoop, Bianca has kind of formulated and I've basically tested, and I can tell you that they 100% work. And I used to have a couple of clients that I work with, but I can 100% tell you they work. I literally got someone featured in Metro yesterday off the back of what we're about to teach you. So these are tactics that actually work. I promise. This isn't just fluff.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to share my screen because we have a very lovely little lesson to take you through. And just before we start, you guys will probably have questions, which we love and we highly encourage. We will leave space towards the end of the session to answer your questions. So if as we go through this lesson, something comes up for you that you think, oh, I want more clarification on that, or you just have a burning question about getting media and press for yourselves, please make a note of it and we will have time to answer those questions towards the end of the session. But for now, we're going to sort of take you through a little bit about how getting media for yourself works as a business owner. And we have a 5-step strategy that we love because it's super easy to follow, it's repeatable, it gets easier and more fruitful the more you do it. And it will literally take you from I've never had press before, I wouldn't even know where to start, to I know exactly what's process to take to get myself in front of the right people and to hopefully land features in some of the world's top press. So we're going to go through all that. But just before we do, I just want to take a moment to give you guys some food for thought, because something we hear a lot is people seeing media as a kind of nice to have rather than an actual marketing strategy that they can use. And we would challenge you to see that as a bit of a kind of old-fashioned way of thinking about media. So there are a lot of kind of old school founders that we've met who are sort of Gen X and above, who have sort of said to us, oh, you know, I never had to really go after press. It was when I got my sort of 5th round of investment and it all came to me. And, you know, like, you shouldn't really have to be chasing press if you're a successful business. It should be coming to you. We would like to say to you, like, that is absolutely not the case, especially not anymore. And instead of thinking as press as like a gold star that you get at the end of having achieved stuff, if you learn to use it as part of your marketing outreach, it is going to help you achieve the things that you do marketing for in the first place. So whether that's increasing your sales, increasing your revenue, scaling your business, growing your audience, getting more opportunities, whether it's like a book deal or to be a keynote speaker or to get investment or to get like a non-exec board invitation, whatever it might be, all the stuff you're already marketing your business for, press is going to help you get there faster and give you more opportunities that maybe even if you had done a lot on socials, you wouldn't have been able to get without getting press. So before we kind of get into those 5 steps, we have a couple of things to go through first. So as Grace mentioned, a lot of people we know may have thought about getting PR in the past, or they've had it and they've had a not great experience with it. So Grace, do you want to just kind of take us through this cycle of doom that we have seen many, many times when people have talked about their experience of working with PR or doing media outreach?
Absolutely. So yeah, so this is something that Bianca and I put together surprisingly quickly, actually. So we're going to start at the top, which is the 10 to be, I got one piece of major press. Incredible. I'm feeling amazing. Okay, I'm going to sit back and relax. Phew, that was great. Now, actually, hold on, that's not bringing in loads of sales. Why is that not doing that? That's what I was promised. Either my PR told me that was going to happen, or that's just what I thought was going to happen from that one piece of press that happened. So, okay, so I want some more of that major press. That's what's going to make the difference here. So if I've got a PR, why aren't they getting on this? Like, what are they doing? Why are they sitting on their laurels, not working on me? I'm paying them a lot of money. It's probably their fault. I tell you what, I'm going to hound them in case they've forgotten about me. Oh, look at that. I got another amazing piece of press. So this tends to be the cycle. And this is not just, I mean, this tends to be if you've worked with a PR in the past, but this may also have been your experience. If you have done your own outreach personally, it might have happened that you've kind of got one piece, thought it was going to transform everything, but actually what we're here to show you is that it is a buildable thing, and there are different types of press that you need to be getting for different types of goals. So yeah, but this is just the standard. This is what we get all the time, isn't it, Bianca?
Yeah. So I think, you know, as a business owner, and if this has been your experience, or if it's something that you're sort of getting towards, we want to give you this awareness now so that you can navigate it when the time comes. But as you start to scale, you will find that advisors, mentors who've maybe been in the game for a long time will often say, like, oh, something that you should definitely be getting is a PR to start building your reputation and your visibility in the media. And even though I agree with the building your reputation in the media bit, we would challenge you to think, do you really need a PR to do that for you when you can learn the skill set for yourself and keep it in-house and have your team do it on your behalf? Because what often ends up happening is we speak to a lot of founders, start and scale up founders who have maybe had their first round of investment, and they were sort of told, oh, you should definitely portion some of that money towards paying for PR. And PR retainers typically cost on the lower end, you're looking at $2,000 a month, all the way up to sort of 5 figures a month some retainers can cost, which is obviously a significant amount of money. and they've ended up doing it because it's what they feel they should do. And because the PR company they've gone for maybe has a lot of bigger clients that they need to prioritize, or they just haven't necessarily fully understood the message of that particular founder or company, or what they're trying to achieve and the mission they're on, the press they do get falls flat. And because they have no toolkit to help them actually do stuff with the press once they get it, to turn it into more opportunities, they end up concluding that PR doesn't work and going after media doesn't make sense, and it's a waste of time and money. And actually, maybe I will just wait for it to come to me further down the line. So that's what we want to avoid you getting into that situation with. So if you're getting to a point where you're thinking, oh, maybe I should hire PR, just do think about these things and ask yourself, are there ways I can do this for myself before I commit to paying, you know, on the lower end, the salary of a junior member of team for a full year's worth of PR? Or can I actually do this myself and save myself, you know, 30,000 in a year as a very sort of conservative estimate? So how do we actually, so here, yeah, we've talked about this already. I'm not going to go into it. But like, how do we actually think about media, the way media was versus how it is now, and how can that help us do our outreach in a more effective way? So the problem that most people have with when they hire PR is that a lot of PRs are using techniques that sort of don't really work anymore. Grace, do you want to sort of fill us in on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I started my PR agency a long old time ago, and I worked very briefly for a very substantial agency of names I won't name. But we were taught a very old-fashioned way of doing PR, which is send as many emails out as physically possible to as many journalists as physically possible with the same press release. Create one pitch that you send to every single person, no personalization, just get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible. If they don't respond to your email, hound them on the telephone until they pick up and until they write about it. Now, this is still being done today, and sadly it just doesn't work. I mean, the amount of conversations that Bianca and I have had with journalists that we host kind of inside the scoop, and they say it's the worst thing that you can possibly do because it just annoys us. Like, it fills up our inbox. We don't want to pick up the phone because we're probably mid doing something. It's, you know, it just doesn't work anymore. So sadly, that is the kind of standard that a lot of the kind of big reputable PR agencies are still using, those kinds of techniques.
Yeah. And then what this, you know, this used to work because there were a lot less PRs and more journalists than there are now. And sending out, yeah, as Grace said, these mass sort of press releases, sending them out to loads of different people was just standard practice, and it worked much better than it does now. But the media was so different then. You know, there was a lot more physical media, so print media, analog media, as I like to call it. So there were print magazines, print newspapers, and there was a high volume of them. And it was a lot more, it was a much more sort of like longer lead time into getting press. Things moved slower. Audience members had much longer attention spans as well. It was quite normal to sit down with a Sunday paper for a few hours at the weekend and just spend loads of time absorbing all those stories. Whereas now, things are a little bit different. So first of all, as we know, there are so many more platforms and a lot more digital formats than there used to be. So every major media brand now has a very comprehensive website where they'll be uploading a much higher volume of content than they might be putting out in their print edition, or let's say in the BBC, for example, that they're putting out on in their broadcast channels as well, so radio, TV. There's also way more PRs and way less journalists than there used to be, which means there often is more competition for less kind of media real estate space. There's also been a rise in user-generated content. So this is like, for example, when people are, say, at something like a Taylor Swift concert, or people are in an area where there's just been a terrorist attack, and they take footage or recordings on their phones, and then they send them over to news organizations to say, hey, this is what's going on the ground. That is fantastic in terms of giving real, live, up-to-date recordings of what is actually happening. But what it does mean is the media is under a lot more pressure to verify and fact check everything that comes to them. We all know there's a lot of fake news out there. So this is something to just bear in mind. Like if you're ever pitching and you're sending over things like statistics, or you're making a bold claim, you really, really need to be able to back it up with evidence, because the media needs to be able to verify this for their readers or their audience in order to make sure that what they're putting out there isn't fake news. Now, this might make you just think, oh, can't be bothered then. This all just sounds like a massive headache. What is the point? I'm just going to stick with what I feel comfortable doing now. I'm just going to pour my soul and my heart into the black hole that is social media and just do that forever and ever and ever more, and just focus all my marketing efforts on that, because getting media just sounds really, really hard and like a huge amount of effort for not much return. What we would say is, like, obviously having the right techniques is going to mean that the time you're putting in there is time well spent and not just toiling over something that's very rarely going to get you a return. But also, we are in this amazing situation now where we have so much more access to information about the media and the journalists and the storytellers that put it out there than we ever have before. And you'll see when we start getting into our 5-step process that this is really, really going to serve you when you start looking at doing your own media outreach. Because when you know what kind of stories that media outlet is putting out there, how they like to format them, who it is that's telling those stories, whether it's a journalist, a podcast host, a TV host, whomever it might be, how they are navigating those stories, and you can get a good idea of, because of the stories they're putting out there, who that audience might be and what they're interested in. All of that is incredible info and intel that you can use to make your media outreach really, really hot. Oh, just gotta, there we go. So that leads us to sort of talk about, what are publications looking for now then? What does this actually mean when we talk about media's changed from before? This is what it looks like now. What does it mean in terms of what works and what doesn't? So the big things that actually work. The first one, and this is something I will shout from the rooftops forevermore, and if you don't remember anything else from this workshop, please let this be the one thing. The best thing you can do when pitching to the press is focus on adding value to the audience. So any journalist, media host, podcaster, whomever it might be, their number one objective is always to create stories that their audience finds valuable. And value can come in many different forms. Maybe that it's entertaining. It could be that it gives them a different point of view. It could be that it teaches them something. It gives them tips on something. It gives them more information. It takes them on a journey where they recognize themselves in that story and they're given the action points they need to get help off the back of it. Whatever it might be, it has to be valuable for the audience, because as we said before, attention spans are shorter. There's a lot more competition for eyes and ears on content now, because there is so much content going out there all the time, that audience members need to know what they're going to get out of it if they're going to be engaging with the story. If they can't tell from the headline or the name of that podcast episode or whatever, what is in it for them, then they're just not going to engage with it, because they are busy just like us. Another thing that we really want to focus on that works really well in the media is looking at trend-led pitching and topics. So just last night, Grace and I were doing a Q&A inside The Scoop with the Cosmopolitan features editor, a woman called Jennifer Savin, who's an award-winning journalist. She's an investigative journalist. She's done some seriously amazing features. And the biggest thing she was talking about was that at Cosmo, and this is the same for every other major media brand, they are always looking at what audiences are interested in now. What is trending on socials, in terms of the kind of culture, the zeitgeist, what people are talking about, what is trending right now. If you can anchor the pitches that you're sending, even if it's kind of like what we call an evergreen idea. So this is when it could be something that's relevant all the time. For example, maybe you're sending a pitch that's like how to overcome your fear of public speaking, right? Like that is a topic that's evergreen. It's always relevant. But even if you're sending something like that, can you anchor it or hook it to something that's happening now, so that basically you can justify to that journalist or media person why this needs to be covered right now. And then lastly, a clear and targeted approach is much better than scattergun. So in terms of who you're pitching to, so making sure you're focusing on quality pitches over quantity. So you're much better off sending 5 pitches to journalists that are actually covering the kind of stuff that you talk about, rather than being like, oh, just send it to 100 and not personalize it at all, and hopefully one of them will pick it up. That's just a waste of your time and doesn't put you in a good light to the journalist that you're sending it to. But also in terms of the subject matter as well. We'll talk about this in a bit more depth in a little bit, but essentially you want to be making sure that the pitch you're sending has one point, that you're not trying to send pitches that cover 8 different things and you're sort of saying, oh, I could talk about this and I can talk about that and I can talk about everything all in one pitch, because when you do that, it lacks focus. So Grace, on that note then, the flip side of the coin, do you want to take us through what doesn't work anymore with the press?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Bianca said, sending one press release to as many journalists as possible. Now, press releases also are something that we actually teach people not to really bother with. They don't get read like you think they do. People spend hours and hours of their time writing up detailed press releases when it's just not necessary. So that really doesn't work anymore. Sort of sending out that blanket kind of copy to the same people, it just doesn't work. And then the other thing that we talk about a lot is life story and self-congratulatory pitches. Now, what we mean here, as Bianca said, is what you're trying to do when you send a pitch is focus on one element or one idea. Sending your entire life story isn't particularly interesting. Now, we know that you're all amazing. We know that you've all got incredible businesses, that you've lived an amazing life, and that your life has impacted your incredible business. We aren't saying that's not important, but what we're saying is that your life story is not the story that the journalist is going to be interested in. Use elements of your story to back up what you're saying is the best possible way to do this. And then also using marketing material cycled into a pitch. So we see this all the time, and the amount of journalists, again, that we've spoken to who say they just receive literally the same stuff that is shared on social media or sort of sent out to a newsletter list, sort of repackaged up into a pitch, isn't going to work, because again, it's just not interesting. As Bianca said, it's not adding value to a conversation. It's simply just going, here's some stuff that I think is really important to you, but no real reason why, but it's just important to me, so therefore it should be important to you. So yeah, those really don't work these days.
Yeah. So you again might now be thinking, oh my gosh, this all just sounds too much. Like, how is this worth doing? And before we get into our 5 steps, we just want to tell you a little bit about the power of media for you as a founder and for your businesses. So first of all, as we said, like, you can use media in lots of different ways. You can use it to grow your social audiences. You can use it to elevate yourself as the go-to person in your field, which can then lead to keynote speaker offers, for example, book deal offers. You can use it to show people that you've got something that you're launching. You can use it to sell your products, whatever it might be. There are so many things that media can be used for in terms of as a marketing technique. But one big one, which I know Rachel is a real kind of expert on as well, is talking about it in terms of securing investment. So lots of you, I'm sure, will be thinking about securing investment for your businesses at some point in the future. And this is something that media can really help you to achieve. And this is how. So first of all, I'm going to let Grace take over in a second, but one of the biggest things to think about is that companies that excel at PR or media outreach are 7 times more likely to be perceived as a high quality brand than those that don't. And 80% of business decision makers, so we're talking about investors here, people who work in the C-suite, would rather gather their information from articles than through advertisement. Grace, do you want to take over?
Yeah, of course. So following on from that, so 96% of B2B buyers want content with more input from industry thought leaders. That's you guys. Industry thought leaders, that is anyone who owns a business, who has something to say, who can talk confidently on a subject. That is you guys. So when we're talking B2B buyers, also that's business to business. That that statistic is just huge. 84% of marketers believe that PR activities directly contribute to sales by increasing brand visibility. I mean, again, if there's one stat that you can take away from this entire workshop, think about that one. I mean, that is a really, really powerful quote to be able to think about. And then media appearances can significantly influence stock prices and investment decisions. Now, of course, we always know there's the possibility of sort of the bad press versus good press. Now, we are real advocates for being able to take something bad and turn it into something good. So that is not something you need to worry about, but that does kind of fall under this category because, of course, it can influence things negatively or positively. But again, it's just a really important thing to note that media appearances can really bring people to you. They can influence your stock prices by building trust and, of course, investment decisions.
Yeah. And a big reason for this is that obviously investors want to know as much as they possibly can that you're a sure bet, that you have some kind of legacy, you have receipts to show of like how is this going to be successful in the long run. And a huge part of that is the potential for more leads, whether that is you're a product or service-based business, coming into your business. And obviously a huge thing that can help with that is if you are being seen on a global stage, which is what media is. So they know that when they see that you've been in the media, they're like, okay, there's already potential for this to go bigger and bigger than it is. They're getting eyes on them from all over the world or from, you know, a large range of people in the country, whatever it might be. But also it's that third party endorsement. So when we market ourselves, that's us saying we're great, right? And when we get media, that's a completely uninterested third party who is already very well respected by lots of people saying, yeah, no, I agree, this person is really great and they're legit and they're really good at what they do, or this business is great. So when investors see that as well, they're like, oh, there are other people who are already well respected that we respect and hold in high esteem, also saying that this business is great. It's not just them pitching to us saying, this is how amazing we are. So it's just a really useful thing to think about if you are starting to think about going for investment. Start shoring up your reputation and your visibility in the media, and this will help you as you go into investment, showcase to those potential investors that your brand is already building a legacy and a movement beyond just what you're doing yourself, say, for example, on social media. Then also, we just want to give a moment to talk about how freaking great media audiences actually are. They are seriously elite in terms of how we sort of think about them and what they can do for our businesses. So first of all, for particularly like glossy magazines, broadsheet newspapers, etc., big media brands like Forbes, ones that we recognize on a global scale, their audiences are typically affluent. So this means that they typically have disposable income in some kind of way. Also, 88% of readers take action based on recommendations that they see in the media brands that they trust. So if you're featured in a media brand that your audience and your potential leads are really interested and engaged with, they are 88% of them are more likely to take action off the back of that if you've been featured in something like that. Also then 80% of those then share recommendations with others. And 65% of consumers trust earned media more than any other form of marketing. And again, this comes back to this idea of third-party endorsement. So this is a completely disinterested party that they already respect, aka the media, saying, yeah, we also think this brand is great. And it's not just us saying, we are great, this is how great we are, which is obviously, I'm not saying just do media, don't do the other marketing, not at all. It is so vital that we market ourselves, but it just adds this other sort of extra layer of believability and kind of sort of extra thing that can help us really secure that level of trust that we need for our potential buyers to make decisions to actually purchase from us in some way. Then what I like, so these are my favorite statistics of all time. So just talking about our sort of social media versus actual media, something to consider is that the average social media user spends just 1.7 seconds on mobile per piece of content. So I always like to think that social media, so Instagram, for example, is a little bit like driving down the Las Vegas Strip at 100 miles an hour, right? We're being bombarded left, right, over and over again, different colors, different branding, all these different people telling us lots of different things all at once. And even though obviously we probably have a lot of followers who do spend more than 1.7 seconds of time on one piece of our content, this is the average, right? So this is what we're kind of working with, and all that time we're putting into socials, we are really on average only taking up 1.7 seconds of somebody's attention with any piece of content that we put out there. Whereas it's not unheard of for someone to spend roughly 7 minutes reading an article that they see in a title that they like. So, sorry, my doorbell just went, but I'm gonna ignore that. Now, something else to consider as well, because podcasts, broadcasts, this is all part of media. It all falls under the same umbrella. The most common length of a podcast episode is between 20 and 40 minutes, and 93% of podcast listeners will listen to the entire episode when they listen. So if you think you've got 1.7 seconds for a social media piece versus the possibility of having up to 40 minutes of attention from one person, from one piece of content that you're putting out there. Sorry, Grace, can you just take over a second, because this person is being relentless with the doorbell.
Yes, of course. So we just wanted to share, as Bianca said, like why media audiences are really truly the best. The podcast episode, I mean, 93% of podcast listeners will listen to the entire episode. We aren't just talking about newspapers and magazines here. We are talking about all kinds of media outlets. So we also talk a lot about kind of like radio, television, panels, like live speaking engagements. All of these kinds of things still fall under the kind of media umbrella. So it's just really important to kind of keep in mind some of these really key statistics that really kind of emphasize why this style of media is so important to your marketing strategy. And what we talk a lot about is, as Bianca said, we're not trying to add time on top of what you've already got to do. We know how busy you are. We get it. What we're trying to show you is that you can actually take time out of the other marketing things that are draining you and take these points and go, actually, let me make my life easier by incorporating some of these techniques, which are then going to grow my audience or do all the other things that I'm trying to do in a way that's much, much easier to follow.
Absolutely. And just something else to think about, which I think is a really important thing, is that, as we were saying, when people are on socials, we're often, even if we don't realize it in our conscious mind, subconsciously, we're sort of in some kind of fight or flight mode. We know often we see stuff on socials that might make us feel inferior, or we might be being sold to, or there's just lots of feelings going around when we're on socials, and we are being inundated with kind of information from all sides when we're on there. Typically, when someone is, say, listening to a podcast, they might be walking the dog, they might be doing the washing up. Their nervous systems are typically more relaxed when they're engaging with earned media over social media, and they're typically only focusing on one thing. Perhaps they're on their commute, sitting there on the tube, like absolutely boiling, but kind of waiting to get to work, and they're just engaging in that one story. Now, when you think about that as a business owner, if you had the opportunity to tell someone in one go, in like 20 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever it might be, like how you can help them, how much of an expert you are in your field, help them feel seen and feel like you are the person who can actually help them achieve what they want to achieve in some way, over having 1.7 second like blips of time to do that, you are able to sort of move them further along that trust process and along that kind of engaged, loyal follower process than you are by just utilizing social media. So without further ado, we're going to get into our 5-step process for getting featured in the media. And something to kind of help you really work out how to do this in a way that is feasible is our personal seasonal press approach. So this is something that we have crafted through all the time we've spent working with founders who we know are very time-strapped and who often feel like they want to get media, but it's like this kind of endless chasm of stuff that they could be doing. We don't want you to be in a situation where you're like, oh, what do I need to do then? Do I need to be like pitching every day? Do I need to sort of be constantly doing this? If I'm not seeing results, when do I go back to the drawing board? When we start feeling like that, that is typically when we go, oh, I'm just going to put this in the for later pile because it feels too overwhelming to deal with. So what we suggest instead, and this is something that we have worked with actual PRs on as well and taught them to do, and they have seen great results for their clients, is taking what we call a seasonal press approach. So this is a bit like if you were a famous actor and you had a film coming out, you would go on a press tour in the lead up to the film coming out. So you would say like 2 months before, you would be on every TV show, every radio show, all the podcasts, you'd be on BuzzFeed playing with puppies and answering questions. You would be in magazines, you'd be on the covers, you'd be talking in the newspapers. But what you would always be doing is you would be only talking about that one thing for that press season. So this is where we say you need to nail down one specific goal for each season. So this could be that your goal for this season is, I want to grow my social media audience. Or your goal could be, we're launching a new product that's going to be coming out. I want to prep people for that and have lots of people joining the wait list for it. Whatever it might be, you need to have a very strong call to action for that season, and it needs to be the same call to action for the entire season. So like we said, if you were a famous actor and you had a film coming out, the call to action would be, watch this film, it's coming out on this date. Go and watch this film, it's coming out on this date. Watch this film, watch this film, watch this film, watch this film. You know, if you think about the Bridgerton press juggernaut that's just happened, Nicola Coughlan has been everywhere. And the call to action has been, watch this film, watch this season of Bridgerton. So we want to take the same approach with our press. And what we love about this approach is that it makes it a lot more feasible for you to actually do. Because if you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do one season, and you can choose how long this season is, it's totally up to you. And you can say, I'm going to take a break between seasons. So I'm going to decide this year I want to do 3 seasons and each one is 2 months long, and I'm going to take whatever, like 3 months in between where I don't do any media outreach at all. But for season 1, I'm going to focus on growing my social media audience. Okay, so how can I dial that back and think, what kind of content or story do I need to put out there that means someone is going to come off the back of it and be like, oh my God, I need to go and find this person on Instagram because they're teaching me really good stuff. Or if I'm launching a product or service and I want lots of people on the wait list, how can I put press ideas out there that are really in line with that mean the logical next step for someone to take when they've engaged with that story is to go to my wait list? Because if you just do a scattergun approach where you're all, you know, like every piece of media, you're trying to sort of get people to follow you, get people to go on your mailing list, you're sort of doing it all at once, it feels really difficult to measure the results of that and to see how that's working. And also it's difficult for the audiences to kind of know what to do next. So how do we actually go about this? Grace, do you want to take step 1?
Sorry, I was on mute, started talking. So yes, so idea generation. As we've mentioned, you aren't the story. You are an expert, a leader with ideas and stories, plural. Your story is not the only thing you can tell. We want you to literally look at everything that you've done and let that influence the pitches that you're sending. So think, Bianca talks about this all the time. This is like drummed into me. Inch wide, mile deep ideas give pitches the focus they need. So what we're talking about here is, if you think about your specific goals, so let's say your goal is going to be brand awareness, your pitch might be about something that you're launching, or it might be about something that is coming up. So that is your inch wide. Now, mile deep is where we can go into that pitch in terms of what stories have you got that's going to influence that? What data have you got to back that up? What stats have you got to back that up? Have you got some great images? Have you got some great quotes from other experts? Really focusing on one idea and then really drilling down on it is going to have much more success than going, oh, I can send this idea and this idea and this idea all in one pitch, and this is also my life story, and that's going to be a brilliant pitch. They're going to be really interested in it. if you can focus in on one idea and really drill down on what that is bringing to that audience specifically, it's going to be much more interesting and engaging for the other person on the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what most of the pitches journalists receive or media people receive are the opposite. Most of them they receive are mile wide, inch deep. So people trying to cover everything, tell their whole life story, talk about all the stuff they could be useful on, as Grace mentioned. And what that means is they cannot go into any kind of depth on any of it unless they're looking to send an email that is like 1,000 words long. It's just never going to work. So we would always say focus on one thing in one pitch and really drill down into that and ask yourself, how can I make this valuable for this particular audience? Then step 2. So you've got some ideas, you're thinking, okay, these are the things that I know I can speak on with authority. I know that, you know, great ways to think about it is like, what do my sort of potential customers or buyers or clients ask me on the regular when they start this process because they've never done it before? Like, what are the typical issues that they struggle with? Those are great places to start for your ideas. The second step is then you need to go away and do your research and figure out which publications and which writers, podcasters, whomever it might be, are the people who actually talk about this stuff already. And it doesn't have to be super hyper specific. So for example, with Rachel, like I'm not an accountancy journalist, right? But I talk about business, I talk about women in business, and I share a lot of advice for other business owners that will be useful to them in their businesses. Okay, so you really want to make sure that you're targeting your ideas to people that it's actually going to be relevant for in the first place. So something to think about here is I contribute to this research that Session put out every year, where they ask lots of people who work in the media industry, like, what is the media looking like right now? What are your main issues? What is it that you're looking for from PRs or from the pitches you receive? And then they collate that into a body of research that they then put out once a year that's like, this is the state of the media this year. And the statistics that came out in January of this year are quite shocking. And that is that only 7% of the pitches that journalists receive are relevant and personalized to them. So even if you just do this step where you research and only send your ideas to people that it's actually relevant for, you are putting yourself ahead of 93% of the pitches that these media people receive. So that's something to think about as well. Think about who is writing these pieces, who is talking about it, how do they format the pieces, how do they work with experts? All of this is going to be really useful for you to then collate a list of like, your media hit list. So who are the people I want to be sending my pitches to? I have a list of names. And then from there, you can take on step 3, which is starting to build relationships with them. So this isn't where you go and slide into their DMs on Instagram and send them a pitch there. This is where you start sort of looking at them as a person and see if you can find them either on like Instagram, Twitter. Basically, every media person is somewhere on social media showing up as their professional selves, where they share their stories and they say publicly that they're a journalist or whatever. Go and find them there. Like, what are they sharing on their socials? What are their interests? When they share their work, can you engage with it in an authentic and meaningful way? Now, the reason we want you to do this is because journalists are just like everybody else in that their inboxes are pretty much always overflowing, and it's a game that you can never win, right? as soon as you like get it down to 0, a load of other emails come in. So journalists will do what we pretty much all do, and they will prioritize emails in this order. The first lot of emails they will look for are from names that are from like people they're expecting to receive emails from. So they'll be looking to see emails coming through that are responses to emails they've sent, for example. So emails they're expecting to receive. The second lot of emails that they will look at are from names that they recognize. And then if they have time, they will look through everything else. If you can put yourself either into category 1 or 2, again, you are putting yourself ahead of all those other people who are pitching them, who haven't taken the time to research and kind of get on their radar before they've sent a pitch. Then step 4, the pitching itself. So as we've already said, pitches need to be personalized and clearly focused on the value that you can offer. So a really great way for you to think about this is less of like, oh, what could this journalist do for me? And more, what can I share that's valuable to their audience? So I'd say like 99% of the pitches I receive are, oh, what could you do for me? Oh, I want to be featured in Forbes. Look how amazing I am. Look how fantastic I am. And this is why you should be featuring me. And they don't take into consideration, what would the audience actually take away from this that is valuable? And if you're able to sort of shift your perspective in your pitching to the latter, what that means is your pitch comes across as a lot more collaborative and like, let's solve a problem for your audience together, as opposed to you sort of being like, oh, I have to be all singing or dancing to impress this journalist. Because also that's just exhausting, right? Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And then finally, I'll let Grace take us away with our step 5.
Of course. So following up. So this is one that we get all the time. And it's interesting, the conversation we had with Jennifer from Cosmo last night, she was actually saying she loves a follow-up, because she was like, I have so many emails that are coming in all the time. She was saying she had about 400 emails a day, just to give you some kind of idea of what her inbox looks like. So she was like, without a follow-up, I probably wouldn't see that email. So don't be scared to follow up after you've sent a pitch, but do think about how often you're going to do it. You really don't need to follow up more than once. If it's something that's really time pressing, as in you've got like a really, really strong news hook that's going to run out within a week, then you could definitely follow up the next day. Give it 24 hours. Do not follow up on the same day. But if there's more of an evergreen idea, then leave it a week, because as we've said, journalists are really busy. They may be on deadline. They may have other things they're focusing on. They may have advertisers coming out of their ears who are saying you've got to write X, Y, Z. So really, with your follow up, just think carefully about what kind of idea it is you're presenting, and then when you should be following up. But the follow-up is a really great way to kind of maintain and build those relationships, because they won't see everything that we send. So it's really important to kind of keep on their radar. So something we have within inside the Scoop is a kind of pitch template, which shows you kind of how to do a monthly follow-up, which is actually something you can do. You can send them an email once every month and just say, hey, just reminding you, this is what I can talk about. If you're looking for an expert in XYZ, this is what I can talk about, etc. And then lastly, on the kind of following up vibe, is please, and this one comes from me more than from Bianca, because I have had clients over the years who I've got into like the Times, they've been in Vogue, and they go, oh, great, cool, great.
Yeah,
and
it's like,
great, nothing with it. It's like crickets. So please, do stuff with your coverage, whether it's putting it on a newsletter, sharing it on your social media, shouting about it from the rooftops, telling your family, telling your friends. And I know that this is a point where you can be like, oh, it feels a little bit like icky to be like sharing this stuff. But this is the moment where you get to actually go, look at me, look how amazing I am at what I do, and look at who else is saying I'm amazing at what I do. So please do stuff with your coverage. Don't just let it sit there and dwell, because trust me, that's when you'll go, oh, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it, because yeah, great, I was in the Times, but nothing really came of it because I didn't do anything with it. Do stuff with it. Please.
Like, don't just talk about it once, because again, we always assume everyone's seeing what we're doing all the time, and it is very rarely the case. So definitely talk about it more than that. And again, this is something we teach extensively in the Scoop in our Turning Media into Sales course, which is like how you actually go away and do stuff with this coverage to leverage it to actually bring in the opportunities that you want. And media can get you there a lot faster sometimes than socials can, just because you're getting out there in front of bigger audiences all in one go. So you can sort of frog leap your way to opportunities sometimes much quicker. But overall, this is our like 5-step process. And what we love about it is that it's buildable. So once you've been through step 5, as we said, if you start like maintaining the relationships you build with journalists, when you go back to step 1 and 2 and 3, you're not starting from scratch every time. You're actually building on the foundation that you've already laid out. So that kind of concludes what we're teaching you here today. And if you're really interested in learning about this a little bit more, we have a free Get Featured in the Media starter kit, which if you just scan the QR code, you can get a copy of. But also, as Rachel said, you can follow us on socials, take a look at our website. We share a lot of other value tips as well on our socials, but essentially, we want you to come away from this and feel empowered to actually be able to take that media and like do your own media outreach without having to hire PR and without feeling like you already have to be insanely well established to even be considered for the media, because it's just not true. And that concludes our lesson for today. Rachel, I don't know if you want to sort of how we want to navigate questions. I'll sort of hand over to you at this point.
Of course. Alrighty, I've been like frantically typing and writing everything down. Alrighty, cool. So we're going to get stuck into some questions. Just to help me moderate, if you could pop your questions in the chat so that I can curate them. We've actually had one from Shrabina already to get stuck into while you guys are asking your questions, which is how do we contact the media and podcasts if they're not on socials? Where would we find out the relevant contact details? I've seen lots of databases that are very expensive. Good question.
Yeah. So, Grace, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, of course. So you're right that sometimes they won't have social media. I mean, the databases are difficult because yes, they are hugely expensive. I would suggest that if most journalists will share their email somewhere, if they don't, then you can sometimes be a little bit cheeky in that find someone else from the publication who has got their email shared somewhere and see what the format is of that email address, because it is a little bit cheeky, but if you know the format of the email address, obviously you can copy, if it's first name dot last name at so-and-so.com, you can follow that format. But obviously this is a little bit cheeky, so be prepared for the fact that that journalist might not come back, because obviously if they don't share their contact details openly, they may not want to be contacted for pitches. But what I would say on that is don't be scared to contact other journalists within that sort of that publication or podcast or whatever, because the chances are is there's someone else who will also be interested in that subject matter. So like, for example, if you're looking at the kind of health and fitness angle, there's not just going to be one person who's going to be writing on that at that publication. There will probably be 5 or 6 other people who one of them will probably have their email shared somewhere. With podcasts, obviously it's a little bit more difficult because if it is just one host, but I would be very surprised if there wasn't somewhere on their website where they had some kind of contact me or sort of like DM on social media, that kind of thing. Podcasts are a little bit different because it tends to be the host who's pooling in guests. So I would suggest if you cannot find their email details anywhere, drop them a DM and say something like, I'd be really interested in having a chat with you. I don't want to necessarily do that over DM. Would you be up for giving me your email? I've got some really interesting ideas to share about XYZ, and then share a little bit of value in your DM. Don't go crazy, but just maybe 2 bullet points of this is some ideas I've got. Would you be up for giving me your email address? I'd love to share more, something like that. But most journalists will have some kind of social contact somewhere. And if not, find someone else from a similar publication, because there's always going to be someone who's going to be willing to write about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just if the information is publicly available, have at it. You know what I mean? Send them that pitch over email, because journalists and podcast hosts, whomever, they are always looking for more stories and more content. So, if you don't send them that pitch, they're never going to be able to consider you. So don't let that stop you if you haven't sort of directly received an email address from them. Do your research and find their email addresses and send them that pitch.
Yeah.
Haley's asked could you give an example of inch wide, mile deep? Get the concept, but would really like an example.
Yeah, love that. So let's just go back to this public speaking thing. So let's say that you are some kind of, I don't know, expert or strategist or something that works with people in ways to market themselves, right? And a big thing that you help people with is becoming a keynote speaker, or let's say you're a booking agent for a keynote speaker, whatever it might be. You work in that field. If you were going to send a mile wide, inch deep pitch, this is where you'd be oh, this is everything I've done. This is my whole life story. I can talk to you about doing public speaking. I can talk to you about booking gigs. I can talk to you about marketing yourself generally and like the benefits of doing public speaking. And I can talk to you about blah, 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 blah. And also this stuff has been going on in the media. And you know what, like that person at the Oscars, they had the music come on because they took so long to do their speech. But also, you know, the elections are out now. So there's lots of stuff going on about public speaking there as well. That is what we call mile wide, inch deep, because you're like literally throwing everything into the same pitch. And what it means is the journalist or whomever's on the receiving end is sitting there being like, okay, so what are you actually pitching to me? Like, what is the story that you're pitching to me? You basically want to have one clear point. So inch wide, mile deep would be if you were going to say, I have a story I'd love to share that I think your audience would find really valuable, because I know your audience are business owners and they are like getting keynote speeches is a really big part of elevating them as a leader in their field. So I have an idea that I'd love to put forward for you, which is 5 tips on how to overcome your fear of public speaking. Because a lot of the time what's holding these founders back from going for keynote speeches is they're really afraid to speak in public. In fact, there's a statistic on this. And here are 3 points about my own backstory. You know, this is my qualification. This is my own experience of this, blah, 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 that give me the right to be the expert to talk about this thing. That's your pitch. Like, that's where you go inch wide, mile deep, and you don't sort of scattergun it and leave them feeling like, I don't know what you're actually asking of me here.
Love that. Julie asked, how do we feel about showing up to events where journalists and PRs might be introducing yourself and trying to get their email addresses that way?
Okay, so first of all, you don't want to do that with PRs unless you're looking to hire them to work on like they will never do something for you for free. So don't worry about PRs, because unless you're wanting to take them on for thousands of pounds a month and like pay them that retainer, don't worry about getting on their radar. Journalists, like if it's events, it's sort of difficult to say, because there's not sort of like lots of big events where journalists are going to be milling around and there's like business owners there as well in that capacity. But what I would say is, if you know that there are journalists who do kind of free workshops, you know, like quite often journalists will go into networking places or events or host free workshops. Like if you can get to those kind of things, then yeah, I would absolutely recommend kind of doing that and networking in that way. But I would always still use the same techniques that we teach, which is like value first, rather than getting in front of them and being like, oh my God, I would love to get featured by you, which is what people say to me a lot when I go and meet them at events. They're like, oh my God, you write for Forbes. I would so love it if you would write about me. And I'm like,
what do you say to that?
I'm just like, oh, well, you know, if you send me an idea and it's something my audience will love, I would definitely consider it. That's what I say, because like that is the only thing that as we said, like any journalist or media person is looking for, is like, do you have something valuable to share that my audience are going to see the value in? So yeah, that's what I would recommend. And again, like inside the scoop, we host monthly Q&As with people working for like the top media in the world. So we've had people from like the Sunday Times, Vogue, as we said, Cosmopolitan. We've got some broadcast journalists coming in as well, broadcast producers coming in who work on like, you know, morning TV and stuff like that. And they are there, like the reason we bring them in is so that our members can actually meet them and get on their radar that way, as well as ask them like, you know, specific questions about pitching to them. So yeah, but I would definitely, if you have the opportunity to network with them in real life, do it. But as we said, just use the same techniques we talk about here, like really focus on like value and being like, oh, I love what you do. And, you know, I, you know, something that could be a really useful you know, like useful thing to help solve a problem for your audience is XYZ, rather than just being like, oh, I want you to write about me.
Yeah.
I'm going to add something really quickly, which is something again that I've seen people try and do often. And that is because they're so desperate for that specific journalist to write about them, they come up with some kind of very loose connection to that journalist. So they might be like, oh, I noticed on your Instagram that you love wild swimming. I also love wild swimming, when they don't actually love wild swimming. And this is just a recipe for disaster. And I know it's so tempting, because you're like, oh, I just really want this person to write about me. I think I've got a really great idea. So I'm just going to tell them that I also love wild swimming, because that's going to connect us. And then we're going to be able to talk about it, even though I know nothing about it. So just be really authentic. Like, don't be tempted to kind of say something that is going to come back and bite you later down the line, because it always will, trust me. So just be really authentic. If you are networking with a journalist sort of live, like, just make sure that what you're saying is really true. Like, if you do love their dress, like, tell them you love their dress. Don't say it unless you really mean it, kind of vibe.
We've had another really good question, actually, which is, if one pitch doesn't work, how persistent would you say you have to be before moving on to another topic or another person and pitching that? So how long do you think it's worth waiting until we know?
Great question.
Yeah, how long do you wait until you know if it's worked or not? And then when
good question. So I would say, like, if you focus on adding value in your pitch and making sure it's well targeted to that person you're pitching to, I can guarantee if it's a no or you don't get a response, it's not because what you have sent isn't good enough. It could be any reason of, like, maybe they're just really busy working on something else at the moment, or blah, blah, blah. I would always just stick with the one follow-up as like a rule of thumb. Like, don't follow up more than once with that particular journalist. Now, what that doesn't mean is you then have to chuck that whole pitch away and never bother with it again. What I would say is, like, if you have some like core foundational ideas, as long as you then reframe it and sort of retarget it to somebody else, and it's like personalized to them again, you've really thought about their audience, you've thought about the kind of mission of that particular media brand, you can use the same idea again if the first person you sent it to didn't say yes. And also, if the person you first sent it to didn't say yes, it doesn't mean you can't ever pitch that person again. Absolutely not. It might just be like, okay, that's going to be a different idea to that I sent them down the line. So, like, don't ever feel like, oh, I've pitched that journalist and they didn't come back to me. How mortifying. Like, I can't pitch them again because it's embarrassing because, like, they didn't say yes to my first pitch. Like, journalists aren't thinking like that. They're always just thinking about, like, putting the stories out there for their audience. So if it wasn't a yes that first time, it doesn't mean it will never be a yes. And also, like, yeah, you can absolutely reuse that pitch elsewhere, as long as you retarget it and make it like more like focused again to the new person that you're pitching it to.
Love that. Any more questions? I feel like we have a lot of resources available at our fingertips. Alrighty, cool. So I'm just gonna